The morning sun cast long shadows across Westminster as Queen Elizabeth II prepared for one of the most significant ceremonial duties of her reign. It was May 11, 2022, and the state opening of Parliament was about to commence. This ancient ritual, dating back centuries, would mark her 70th year on the throne, making it a particularly poignant occasion. In the private chambers of Buckingham Palace, the Queen's personal dresser carefully laid out the ceremonial robes. The George IV state diadem sparkled under the morning light, its 1,333 diamonds catching every ray that filtered through the palace windows. This crown, worn specifically for the journey to and from Parliament, had adorned the heads of British monarchs for over 2 centuries. The Queen herself moved slowly but deliberately, her 96-year-old frame showing the weight of 7 decades of service. Her hands, weathered by time but still steady, reached for the imperial state crown that would later rest upon her head during the ceremony. She had worn this crown countless times before, but today felt different. There was an awareness in the air that this might be among her final state openings. Lady-in-waiting Susan Hussey stood nearby, offering quiet assistance and companionship. The two women had worked together for decades, their relationship built on mutual respect and understanding. Susan understood the magnitude of the day ahead and the physical challenges it would present for Her Majesty. Meanwhile, at the Palace of Westminster, preparations had been underway since dawn. The House of Lords chamber was being transformed into a glittering spectacle of British pageantry. Red leather benches were polished to perfection, and the throne at the far end of the chamber received special attention from the maintenance staff. Black Rod, Sarah Clark, was conducting her final security checks. As the first woman to hold this position in its 650-year history, she carried the weight of tradition while breaking new ground. Her ceremonial rod, made of ebony and topped with a golden lion, would soon play its crucial role in the ancient ritual that was about to unfold. In the Commons chamber, politicians from all parties were gathering. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, despite the political turbulence surrounding his leadership at the time, maintained the dignity required for such an occasion. Opposition leaders prepared to hear the government's legislative agenda for the coming year, knowing that every word in the Queen's speech had been carefully crafted by Downing Street. The media had assembled in unprecedented numbers outside Parliament. This state opening carried extra significance due to the Queen's advanced age and recent mobility issues. Reporters from around the world understood they might be witnessing history in the making. Back at Buckingham Palace, the Royal Muse had prepared the Diamond Jubilee State Coach for the journey to Westminster. This relatively modern addition to the royal fleet, built in 2012, incorporated air conditioning and hydraulic stabilizers to ensure the Queen's comfort during the journey. The decision to use this coach instead of the traditional gold state coach reflected the palace's consideration for Her Majesty's well-being. The Queen's private secretary, Sir Edward Young, made his final review of the speech text. Every word had been scrutinized by government officials, constitutional experts, and palace staff. The document outlined the government's legislative priorities, from healthcare reforms to economic policies, all to be delivered in the Queen's measured, authoritative tone. As the morning progressed, members of the household cavalry began their preparation at Hyde Park Barracks. Their magnificent horses were groomed to perfection, their ceremonial uniforms checked and rechecked. These soldiers would provide the escort for Her Majesty's journey, maintaining a tradition that stretched back through the centuries. The Queen's hairdresser made final adjustments to ensure the imperial state crown would sit properly during the ceremony. This crown, containing the famous Cullinan II diamond and St. Edward's sapphire, weighed over 2 pounds. At the Queen's age, every consideration was made to minimize physical strain while maintaining the dignity of the occasion. Television crews positioned their cameras along the route from Buckingham Palace to Westminster. The BBC's coverage would reach millions of viewers worldwide, many of whom were acutely aware of the Queen's age and the historical significance of potentially witnessing one of her final major ceremonial appearances. In the Royal Gallery of the House of Lords, dignitaries took their assigned positions. Foreign ambassadors, high commissioners, and other distinguished guests understood the privilege of witnessing this constitutional ceremony. The gallery provided an elevated view of the proceedings that would unfold in the chamber below. The Queen's personal physician conducted a final health check, ensuring Her Majesty was well enough to undertake the demanding schedule ahead. The ceremony would require her to remain standing and walking for extended periods, a considerable challenge given her recent mobility issues. As midday approached, the atmosphere throughout Westminster grew increasingly charged with anticipation. Staff members made final adjustments to microphones and lighting systems. The ceremony would be broadcast live, requiring perfect technical execution to capture every moment for posterity. The Queen's equerry reviewed the precise timing of each element of the procession. From the moment she would leave Buckingham Palace to her return several hours later, every minute was accounted for. The coordination required between multiple organizations was immense, involving the police, military, parliamentary staff, and royal household. In the House of Commons, members of Parliament prepared to make their traditional procession to the House of Lords to hear the Queen's speech. This migration from one chamber to another symbolized the constitutional relationship between the Commons, the Lords, and the Crown. The Queen's dresser made final adjustments to the robe of state, ensuring it would drape properly during the ceremony. This magnificent garment, with its long train carried by pages, represented the continuity of monarchy through the centuries. Every fold and drape had ceremonial significance. Outside Parliament, crowds began to gather despite the formal nature of the occasion. Many onlookers were drawn by the historical significance of the moment, understanding they might be witnessing one of the Queen's final major public appearances. The mood was respectful but tinged with an awareness of mortality and the passage of time. As the final preparations concluded, Queen Elizabeth II stood in her private apartments, fully dressed in her ceremonial attire. The weight of the crown, the responsibility of her role, and the significance of the day ahead all converged in this quiet moment before she would step into the public eye once more. At precisely 11:30 a.m., the great doors of Buckingham Palace opened, and Queen Elizabeth II emerged into the public gaze. The Diamond Jubilee State Coach awaited her, its glass panels allowing spectators to witness this historic moment. Her Majesty moved carefully but purposefully, assisted discreetly by her equerry. The sight of her in full regalia, despite her advanced age, drew respectful applause from the gathered crowd. The imperial state crown sat securely upon her head, its weight distributed carefully to minimize discomfort. The Queen's expression remained composed and dignified as she settled into the coach's specially designed interior. The hydraulic system engaged smoothly, ensuring her comfort during the journey ahead. The processional route from Buckingham Palace to Westminster had been cleared and secured hours earlier. Metropolitan police officers stood at regular intervals, their presence both protective and ceremonial. The sight of the royal coach progressing through London's streets drew onlookers to windows and sidewalks, many raising their phones to capture this potentially historic moment. The household cavalry escort took their positions with military precision. Their horses, trained specifically for ceremonial duties, moved in perfect formation despite the crowds and noise surrounding them. The scarlet tunics and plumed helmets of the Life Guards contrasted beautifully with the morning light, creating a spectacle that embodied centuries of British tradition. As the procession made its way down the Mall, television commentators around the world provided context for viewers. Many noted the significance of the Queen's determination to fulfill her constitutional duties despite her age and recent health concerns. The commentary was respectful, but tinged with the awareness that this might be a farewell appearance. The Queen's lady-in-waiting, traveling in a following carriage, maintained visual contact with Her Majesty throughout the journey. Every aspect of the Queen's well-being was being monitored, with contingency plans in place should any difficulties arise. The palace had learned to balance the demands of ceremony with the realities of advancing age. Along Whitehall, civil servants and government workers gathered at windows to catch a glimpse of their sovereign. Many had served under her reign for their entire careers, understanding the constitutional significance of this moment. The Queen represented continuity in a world of constant political change. The carriage passed the cenotaph, where the Queen had laid wreaths for decades during Remembrance Sunday ceremonies. This monument to Britain's war dead held special meaning for her, representing the sacrifices made during her long reign. She acknowledged the memorial with a slight inclination of her head. As the procession approached Parliament Square, the crowds grew denser. School children, brought specifically to witness this historic occasion, waved small Union Jack flags. Their teachers had explained the constitutional importance of the state opening, making this both an educational experience and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The bells of Westminster Abbey began to toll as the royal carriage approached the Palace of Westminster. This ancient building, rebuilt after World War II bombing, stood as a testament to the resilience of British democracy. The Queen had opened Parliament here dozens of times, but the weight of tradition never diminished. Inside Parliament, the final preparations were reaching completion. The yeomen of the Guard, in their distinctive Tudor uniforms, took their ceremonial positions throughout the building. These guards, established by Henry VII in 1485, represented an unbroken link to England's medieval past. Black Rod, Sarah Clark, prepared for her crucial role in the ceremony. The tradition of Black Rod summoning the Commons to hear the Queen's speech dated back to the reign of Charles. The symbolic closing and reopening of the Commons' door represented parliamentary independence from royal interference. In the House of Lords chamber, peers began taking their seats. The red leather benches filled with dukes, earls, barons, and life peers, their ceremonial robes creating a sea of scarlet and ermine. The atmosphere was solemn yet expectant, as everyone understood the historical significance of the moment. The Lord Chancellor, Dominic Raab, made his final review of the ceremonial procedures. As Keeper of the Great Seal, he would present the Queen's speech for her to read. Every detail of protocol had been rehearsed, ensuring the ancient ceremony would proceed flawlessly. Television cameras positioned throughout the chamber made their final adjustments. The lighting had been specifically designed to capture the majesty of the occasion while being respectful to the Queen's age. Technical directors understood that any failure could mar this potentially historic broadcast. The Queen's carriage finally arrived at the sovereign's entrance to the Palace of Westminster. This private entrance, reserved exclusively for royal use, allowed Her Majesty to enter the building away from the larger crowds. The ornate Gothic architecture provided a fitting backdrop for this constitutional ceremony. As the carriage doors opened, the Queen emerged with careful dignity. The train of her robe of state was immediately attended to by her pages, young men specially trained for this ceremonial duty. Every movement was choreographed to ensure both safety and dignity. The interior of Parliament welcomed the Queen with its familiar Gothic splendor. The royal staircase, lined with parliamentary officials and palace staff, provided the route to the robbing room where final preparations would be made. The stone walls had witnessed countless such ceremonies over the centuries. In the robbing room, the Queen's dresser made final adjustments to the robe of state and ensured the imperial state crown was positioned correctly. This brief respite allowed Her Majesty to compose herself before entering the House of Lords chamber. The weight of ceremony and expectation was palpable in the ornate room. Parliamentary officials conducted their final security checks, ensuring every aspect of the ceremony would proceed safely. The Queen's personal protection officers maintained their vigilant watch while remaining invisible to the cameras that would soon broadcast this moment to the world. The Lord Great Chamberlain, the Earl of Ancaster, prepared to lead the Queen into the chamber. This hereditary position, dating back to Norman times, carried the responsibility of organizing royal ceremonies within Parliament. The Earl understood the gravity of potentially overseeing one of the Queen's final state openings. Outside the chamber doors, the assembled peers and officials waited in respectful silence. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and historical awareness. Many present understood they were about to witness a moment that would be remembered for generations. The Queen's private secretary made his final check of the speech text. Every word would be delivered in Her Majesty's distinctive voice, but the content represented the government's legislative program. This constitutional arrangement, where the monarch reads the elected government's plans, embodied Britain's unique democratic system. As the appointed time approached, Queen Elizabeth II prepared to fulfill one of her most important constitutional duties. The weight of 7 decades on the throne, the expectations of a nation, and the significance of this potentially final state opening all converged as she prepared to enter the House of Lords chamber. The great doors of the House of Lords chamber opened, and a hush fell over the assembled gathering. Queen Elizabeth II, accompanied by Prince Charles, who would soon become King Charles III, entered with measured steps. The imperial state crown caught the chamber's lights, creating an almost ethereal glow around her aged but dignified figure. Every eye was upon her as she made her way toward the throne that had witnessed countless such moments throughout British history. The peers rose as one, their scarlet and ermine robes creating a magnificent tableau of respect and tradition. The Queen acknowledged their reverence with a slight nod, her composure absolute despite the physical challenges of the moment. The sound of her footsteps on the ancient stones echoed through the chamber, each step marking another moment in constitutional history. Prince Charles, as heir to the throne, walked slightly behind his mother, ready to provide assistance if needed. His presence added poignancy to the occasion, as many understood this ceremonial partnership between mother and son might be among their last. The continuity of monarchy was visibly represented in their shared participation. The Queen reached her throne and turned to face the assembly. The throne itself, carved and gilded in the Victorian era, had supported monarchs through world wars, social upheavals, and constitutional changes. As she prepared to sit, her pages carefully arranged the train of her robe of state, ensuring every fold fell perfectly. The Lord Chancellor approached with the speech, contained in a special silk bag that had carried royal speeches for generations. This document, printed on goatskin vellum, contained the government's legislative agenda, presented in the formal language of centuries past. The Lord Chancellor bowed deeply before presenting the speech to Her Majesty. Black Rod, Sarah Clark, now prepared for her historic role in the ceremony. The tradition she was about to enact dated back to 1642, when King Charles I attempted to arrest 5 members of Parliament. The symbolic closing of the Commons' door and its subsequent reopening represented Parliament's hard-won independence from royal interference. Sarah Clark walked through the corridors of Parliament toward the House of Commons, her ebony rod topped with a golden lion held with ceremonial precision. The weight of being the first woman to perform this ancient ritual was not lost on her. Every step carried both personal significance and centuries of constitutional tradition. The Commons chamber buzzed with conversation as members of Parliament awaited Black Rod's arrival. Politicians from all parties understood the solemnity of the moment, setting aside their usual partisan divisions for this constitutional ceremony. The Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, maintained order as the ancient ritual played out. The great doors of the Commons slammed shut as Black Rod approached, the sound echoing through Westminster Hall. This symbolic gesture, repeated for nearly 4 centuries, represented Parliament's independence from royal authority. The closure was deliberate and theatrical, emphasizing the Commons' right to control its own proceedings. Black Rod struck the door 3 times with her ceremonial staff, the sound reverberating through the chamber beyond. Each strike carried constitutional weight, representing the formal request for the Commons to attend the Queen's speech. The ritual words that followed had been spoken by her predecessors for generations. "Mr. Speaker, the Queen commands this honorable House to attend Her Majesty immediately in the House of Peers," Sarah Clark announced, her voice carrying clearly through the open door. These formal words, unchanged for centuries, bridged the ancient and modern aspects of British democracy. The Commons members began their traditional procession to the House of Lords, walking through the corridors that had witnessed similar scenes throughout parliamentary history. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, despite the political controversies surrounding him, maintained the dignity required for the occasion. Opposition leaders followed, their usual antagonism temporarily set aside. Back in the Lord's chamber, Queen Elizabeth II waited with patient dignity as the Commons approached. The physical strain of standing and sitting repeatedly was considerable for someone of her age, but she showed no sign of discomfort. Her lifetime of ceremonial experience guided her through each movement with practiced grace. The arrival of the Commons transformed the atmosphere in the Lord's chamber. The red benches of the Lords contrasted with the green-clad members crowding into the bar of the House, creating a visual representation of Britain's bicameral system. Centuries of constitutional development were embodied in this single moment. The Queen opened the speech with words that had echoed through this chamber for decades. "My lords and members of the House of Commons." Her voice, though showing her age, retained the authority and clarity that had characterized her 7 decades on the throne. Every word was delivered with careful precision. The legislative agenda she outlined covered healthcare improvements, economic recovery measures, and social reforms. Each policy proposal had been debated extensively in government circles before being committed to the Queen's speech. The monarch's role as the neutral presenter of elected government policy was perfectly embodied in her measured delivery. Television cameras captured every moment for global audiences, many of whom understood they might be witnessing history. The BBC's coverage reached millions worldwide, with commentators providing respectful analysis while maintaining awareness of the occasion's potential finality. International observers noted the stability represented by this ancient ceremony. As the Queen continued reading, her son Prince Charles remained attentively nearby, ready to provide assistance if needed. The sight of the future king supporting the current monarch created a powerful image of continuity and transition. Many observers understood they were witnessing a generational handover in real time. The speech addressed Brexit's aftermath, outlining legislation to manage Britain's new relationship with Europe. These contemporary concerns, delivered through centuries-old ceremonial language, demonstrated how ancient institutions adapted to modern realities. The Queen's neutral presentation gave weight to contentious political issues. Economic policies featured prominently in the speech, addressing post-pandemic recovery and cost-of-living concerns. The government's response to contemporary challenges was presented through the formal language of constitutional monarchy. Every proposal carried the weight of royal presentation, despite originating from elected politicians. The assembled peers and commons listened in respectful silence as their sovereign outlined the coming year's legislative program. Political disagreements would resume after the ceremony, but for this moment, parliamentary democracy was united in constitutional observance. The ceremony transcended party politics. Healthcare improvements, education reforms, and infrastructure investments were outlined with careful attention to detail. The Queen's delivery remained steady despite the speech's length and her advanced age. Her commitment to constitutional duty was evident in every carefully pronounced word. As she progressed through the speech, the historical weight of the moment grew more apparent. Many present understood they might never again witness Queen Elizabeth II performing this most important of her ceremonial duties. The atmosphere was charged with both reverence and impending change. The Queen's voice carried through the chamber with remarkable clarity, each word precisely articulated despite her 96 years. Decades of public speaking experience guided her through the complex legislative language. Her professionalism never wavered, even as the physical demands of the ceremony became increasingly apparent. Climate change legislation featured prominently in the government's agenda, reflecting contemporary global concerns. The Queen's presentation of environmental policies demonstrated how monarchy had evolved to address modern challenges while maintaining ancient ceremonial forms. Tradition and progress merged seamlessly in her delivery. As Queen Elizabeth II neared the conclusion of the speech, the weight of the moment intensified throughout the chamber. Her voice, though showing signs of fatigue, maintained its authoritative tone as she outlined the final elements of the government's legislative program. The assembled parliamentarians remained in respectful silence, many recognizing they were witnessing a potentially historic finale to 7 decades of constitutional service. The Queen's reading of criminal justice reforms demonstrated her continued engagement with contemporary issues, despite her advanced age. Each policy proposal was delivered with the careful neutrality that had characterized her entire reign. Her role as constitutional monarch required her to present government policies without personal opinion, a duty she had fulfilled perfectly for over 70 years. Prince Charles watched his mother with visible concern and pride, understanding the physical demands she was enduring for the sake of constitutional duty. The future King Charles III observed her performance with deep respect, knowing he would soon inherit these same responsibilities. The generational transition was almost palpable in their shared presence on this historic occasion. The speech addressed digital technology legislation, highlighting how ancient institutions adapted to modern realities. Queen Elizabeth II, who had witnessed the transformation from analog to digital age during her reign, delivered these contemporary policies with the same gravitas she applied to traditional matters. Her ability to bridge historical eras was remarkable. Financial services regulations featured prominently in the latter portion of the speech, reflecting post-Brexit economic adjustments. The Queen's presentation of complex economic policies demonstrated her thorough preparation despite her age. Every technical term was pronounced correctly, showing the careful briefing she had received from government officials. Educational reforms were outlined with particular attention to university funding and skills training. The Queen's delivery of these policies affecting younger generations showed her continued connection to Britain's future, despite her own advanced years. Her commitment to constitutional duty transcended personal considerations about age and health. The chamber's atmosphere grew increasingly solemn as the speech progressed toward its conclusion. Many peers and Commons members understood they might never again hear Queen Elizabeth II deliver these constitutional words. The historical significance of the moment was reflected in the absolute attention paid to every syllable. Housing legislation received detailed treatment in the government's program, addressing one of Britain's most pressing social issues. The Queen's presentation of these policies affecting ordinary families demonstrated how monarchy remained connected to contemporary concerns. Her neutral delivery gave weight to contentious political issues. As she moved through the final pages, the Queen's composure remained absolute despite visible signs of fatigue. Decades of public duty had trained her to complete ceremonial obligations regardless of personal discomfort. Her professionalism in this challenging moment exemplified a lifetime of service to the Crown and Constitution. The speech's conclusion approached with policies on veterans' affairs and defense spending. The Queen, who had served as colonel-in-chief of numerous military regiments throughout her reign, delivered these sections with particular gravity. Her personal connection to Britain's armed forces was evident in her careful pronunciation of military terminology. International relations featured in the final policy areas, addressing Britain's post-Brexit role in global affairs. Queen Elizabeth II, who had met every major world leader of her era, presented these foreign policy objectives with the authority of vast diplomatic experience. Her 7 decades of international engagement informed her delivery. The Queen's breathing became slightly more labored as she neared the speech's end, but her determination to complete the ceremony properly never wavered. Prince Charles leaned forward slightly, ready to provide assistance if needed. The sight of royal duty being passed between generations was deeply moving for many observers. Parliamentary tradition required specific closing words that had been spoken by monarchs for centuries. Queen Elizabeth II prepared to deliver these ancient phrases, knowing they might be her final utterance of this constitutional formula. The weight of finality hung heavy in the chamber's air. "I pray that the blessing of Almighty God may rest upon your counsels," she began the traditional conclusion, her voice carrying across the silent chamber with remarkable clarity. These words, spoken by her predecessors through centuries of parliamentary democracy, took on special significance given her age and the ceremony's potential finality. The closing prayer for divine guidance on parliamentary proceedings reflected the constitutional monarchy's religious foundations. Queen Elizabeth II, as Supreme Governor of the Church of England, delivered these words with deep sincerity. Her faith had sustained her through 7 decades of public service. As the final words of the speech concluded, a profound silence filled the chamber. Queen Elizabeth II had completed another state opening of Parliament, potentially her last. The achievement was remarkable given her 96 years and recent mobility challenges. Every person present understood they had witnessed something extraordinary. The Queen carefully folded the speech and handed it back to the Lord Chancellor, completing the constitutional transfer of the government's legislative agenda to Parliament. This simple gesture represented the culmination of months of political preparation and centuries of constitutional tradition. The democracy she had served so faithfully would now debate and decide on these proposals. Prince Charles stood as his mother prepared to rise from the throne, ready to provide any necessary assistance. The sight of the future king supporting the current monarch created a powerful image of constitutional continuity. Many observers understood they were witnessing the peaceful transition of royal authority. The Queen rose from her throne with careful dignity, accepting Prince Charles's proffered arm for support. The imperial state crown remained perfectly positioned despite the ceremony's demands. Her movements were deliberate and graceful, showing no sign of the physical effort required. The assembled peers and commons remained standing in respectful silence as their sovereign prepared to leave the chamber. The traditional protocol required them to remain until the Queen had completely departed. This final gesture of respect was particularly poignant given the ceremony's potential finality. The journey back through Parliament's corridors began with measured steps, the Queen's pages carefully managing her robe of state's train. Every movement was observed by officials and cameras, documenting what many believed might be her final performance of this ancient constitutional ritual. The Queen's departure from the Lord's Chamber marked the successful completion of another state opening of Parliament. Her determination to fulfill this constitutional duty, despite her advanced age and physical challenges, had been an inspiration to everyone present. The ceremony represented the pinnacle of her lifelong commitment to service. As she processed through Westminster's ancient corridors, Queen Elizabeth II could reflect on another constitutional duty successfully completed. The speech she had just delivered would guide parliamentary business for the coming year, continuing the democratic process she had faithfully served throughout her remarkable reign. Her dedication to duty had never wavered, even in her final years. The journey from the House of Lords chamber back to the robbing room provided Queen Elizabeth II with a brief respite from public scrutiny, though cameras still followed her progress through Parliament's historic corridors. Each step was carefully managed, with Prince Charles maintaining his supportive presence beside her. The weight of what had just been accomplished was evident in the respectful silence of everyone they passed. In the robbing room, the Queen's dresser waited to assist with the removal of the ceremonial regalia. The imperial state crown was carefully lifted from Her Majesty's head, its 2-pound weight having been borne with remarkable grace throughout the ceremony. The relief of removing this burden was visible, though the Queen's dignity remained absolute. The robe of state, with its magnificent train and historical significance, was carefully removed and prepared for storage until the next state opening. Every fold was handled with reverence, understanding that this might have been the last time Queen Elizabeth II would wear these particular ceremonial garments. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. Prince Charles remained close to his mother as she prepared for the journey back to Buckingham Palace. Their partnership during this ceremony had provided a powerful image of monarchical continuity, showing how constitutional duties would seamlessly transfer to the next generation. The future king had witnessed firsthand the dedication required for these ancient responsibilities. The Queen's personal physician conducted a discreet health check, ensuring she was well enough for the return journey. The ceremony had demanded considerable physical endurance, and her medical team wanted to confirm she had not overextended herself. Her remarkable resilience throughout the morning had impressed everyone involved. Parliamentary officials began their own post-ceremony activities, documenting every aspect of the event for historical records. The potential significance of this being Queen Elizabeth II's final state opening meant that every detail needed careful preservation. Future historians would study this day as a pivotal moment in constitutional history. The Diamond Jubilee State Coach waited outside Parliament's sovereign entrance, its climate-controlled interior ready to provide comfort for the return journey. The decision to use this modern vehicle instead of the traditional gold state coach reflected the palace's ongoing efforts to accommodate the Queen's age while maintaining ceremonial dignity. As Queen Elizabeth II emerged from Parliament, the waiting crowds erupted in respectful applause. Many understood they had just witnessed something remarkable, a 96-year-old monarch completing one of the most demanding ceremonies in the constitutional calendar. The sight of her emerging successfully from Parliament was deeply moving for many observers. The Queen's entry into the state coach was managed with careful attention to her comfort and dignity. Her equerry ensured she was properly settled before the vehicle began its journey back through London's streets. The return journey would provide an opportunity for reflection on another constitutional duty successfully completed. The processional route back to Buckingham Palace was lined with even larger crowds than the morning journey. Word had spread about the Queen's successful completion of the ceremony, drawing additional well-wishers to the streets. Many held flowers and small flags, their faces showing deep affection for their long-serving monarch. The household cavalry escort maintained perfect formation during the return journey, their presence both protective and celebratory. These soldiers understood the historical significance of what they had just participated in, knowing they might have provided escort for Queen Elizabeth II's final state opening of Parliament. Television coverage of the return journey was extensive, with commentators noting the Queen's apparent satisfaction at having completed another challenging ceremony. Her visible relief at the successful conclusion of her constitutional duty was apparent to those who knew her well. The achievement was remarkable given her age and physical limitations. As the procession made its way up the Mall toward Buckingham Palace, the crowds grew increasingly enthusiastic. The successful completion of another state opening had reinforced the Queen's remarkable dedication to duty. Many spectators were moved by her determination to continue serving despite her advanced years. The palace gates came into view as the Diamond Jubilee State Coach approached the end of its historic journey. The morning that had begun with careful preparation and considerable anxiety was concluding with a sense of achievement and relief. Queen Elizabeth II had once again demonstrated her unwavering commitment to constitutional duty. Back at Parliament, members of both houses began their traditional responses to the Queen's speech. The legislation outlined during the ceremony would now be debated, amended, and potentially enacted into law. The democratic process that the Queen had just initiated would continue throughout the parliamentary session. The Queen's successful completion of this demanding ceremony had profound implications for the monarchy's future. Her demonstration that constitutional duties could be fulfilled despite advanced age provided valuable precedent for future monarchs. The example she set would guide constitutional practice for generations to come. International reaction to the ceremony was overwhelmingly positive, with world leaders and media outlets praising Queen Elizabeth II's dedication and professionalism. The image of the elderly monarch fulfilling her constitutional duties, despite obvious physical challenges, resonated globally, reinforcing Britain's reputation for stable democratic governance. As the state coach entered the palace courtyard, Queen Elizabeth II could reflect on another successful state opening of Parliament. The ceremony had demanded everything she could give, both physically and emotionally, but constitutional duty had been properly served. Her lifelong commitment to service had been demonstrated once more. The Queen's lady-in-waiting and medical team were ready to assist with her comfort following the demanding morning. The physical requirements of the ceremony, combined with her 96 years, meant careful attention to her well-being was essential. However, her successful completion of these demanding duties was a testament to her remarkable constitution. Prince Charles accompanied his mother back into the palace, their shared experience of this potentially historic ceremony having strengthened their bond as serving royals. The future king had witnessed the dedication required for constitutional monarchy, preparation that would serve him well in his own reign. The imperial state crown was returned to the Tower of London for safekeeping, its role in this historic ceremony complete. The crown had witnessed another chapter in British constitutional history, potentially the final time it would be worn by Queen Elizabeth II for a state opening of Parliament. Media coverage of the ceremony continued throughout the day, with analysts noting the Queen's remarkable achievement in completing such a demanding constitutional duty at her advanced age. The successful state opening would be remembered as a testament to her lifelong dedication to service, duty, and the constitutional monarchy that had defined her extraordinary reign. As evening approached, Queen Elizabeth II rested in her private apartments, knowing she had once again fulfilled her constitutional obligations with dignity and professionalism. The day that many had feared might be beyond her capabilities had been completed successfully, reinforcing her position as one of history's most dedicated constitutional monarchs.